Okay, everyone, we'll make a start. It's just after 10, so welcome to the Public Accountability Board. We have a hybrid meeting today, so some people are present in the room with me here at Police Force Headquarters at Carbrook, and then there are quite a number of people who are joining us remotely, so welcome to everyone. I won't go through the whole list, but because we can see who's joining in, we should be able to keep a record of who was at the meeting. Of apologies, though, we have apologies from Chief Constable Lauren Poultney, who's on holiday, and from Erica Redfern, and from Sarah Pullman, who I guess is also on annual leave, probably.
Yes, she is.
Okay. And in the room I've got Tim Forber, the Deputy Chief Constable, James Abdi, District Commander from Barnsley, Dan Thorpe, David Hartley, and then Deborah Carrington from SYP, June Rennick, and Sally Parkin from my office. All welcome. I have to say we're being live streamed and also filmed, so if anyone doesn't want to be seen, they must leave the room or switch themselves off pretty smartly. Moving down the agenda then to announcements. I don't think there are any announcements unless anyone here has an announcement. No. So public questions. There is a public question. We've received it and I've given a written reply. I'll read the written reply, and if Anne McCaskill is on the call, I might ask her to supplement the reply. So the written question was, the IEP, the Independent Ethics Panel, report references disproportionality in the use of stop and search against BAME individuals. The report states that work is continuing to be done to understand the issue. Would the PCC provide details of this work and by when he expects it to be completed? So if I read the written response and then I'll see whether Anne wants to add anything to it. So there is a data piece of work being done around stop and search disproportionality. The way that disproportionality of stop and search is currently measured uses ethnicity population data from the 2011 census, and so is very much out of date, something we've commented on in this room many times. In addition, stop and search disproportionately is measured using ethnicity data for the whole population of South Yorkshire, when we know that stop and searches are predominantly carried out on particular age groups, e.g. more younger people, and can be focused on specific areas of South Yorkshire rather than the whole of South Yorkshire. Therefore, we are looking to get more sophisticated in the use of data to properly understand how minority ethnic communities are disproportionately affected. For example, using ethnicity data linked to age and particular areas of the county. There's also work being done to restart and to expand the external scrutiny of stop and search. This includes ensuring the views and voices of minority ethnic groups are heard from these external groups. Each SYP district now has a stop and search single point of contact whose role is to be the lead person for stop and search in their district, and they will support work in ensuring good external scrutiny in each district. Now, Anne, if you're on the call, you may want to add to that, because I know you're contacting other groups to see how we can improve the scrutiny. Well, I think we've lost Anne altogether, so I'll read what she has said to me, and I think that's what she was going to say.
Commissioner, we can't hear anything now because I think you're muted in the room.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Oh, we can.
Yeah, we can.
Yes, do you want to go ahead, Anne?
Yeah, that's fine. I had to come out and come in again for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been looking at, in terms of stop and search, we've made contact with it's the head of the South Yorkshire Youth Offending Team and other members of the team, and they have already had a look with some of their clients at attitudes towards stop and search and the experience that some of their clients have had. So we're now organising a meeting with this team just to kind of share their experiences and to see whether some of their clients would be willing to meet with us and have focus groups and to look at the experience not only of the ethnic minority young people that they're working with, but also with the white young people, because, you know, and so that we could kind of compare experiences. That's one of the things we're looking at. The other thing is we've had discussions with Sarah Gilmore, the new lead, and she's quite keen to look in some more detail at some of the data about differences in stop and search in different teams across the force, with the potential for us to meet with some officers and discuss this further to try to get a better understanding of it so we can report to the Commissioner.
And do you have any idea, Anne, about timescales, which was also in the question?
Well, we had hoped to have had some of our meetings already, but because of annual leave, it looks like it will be September when we start doing some of this.
Okay, thank you very much, thank you. Moving on then to item 5, which is urgent items. I don't think there are any urgent items, but we may have an update on COVID and the impact on the force and how we're coming out of...
Dave will be quite happy to give you an update on that.
Indeed, Commissioner, I mean, very briefly, we know that the county is facing a very high level of infection. That's around the 400 mark now, right across the county. Organisationally, we are stable as we face this fairly significant challenge around our demand that we face after unlocking. Of course, it's summertime, so we see abstractions through annual leave, and of course through the infection rate and isolation until things change on Monday, we face the challenge around abstractions. But we've got some detailed plans in place for those throughout August, the resumption of the football. They actually take us right the way through to October, some detailed plans, because we know we are likely to see a further change in the infection rate when schools and universities go back, and of course it's not just the young people, it's when they link back with families that we're likely to see people that work within SYP affected from that infection rate. So we've got plans throughout then, and of course we go through to the end of October, November, where we support COP26 and the challenge around Police Scotland, so we know that we're going to have to supply some resources there. So the reassurance I would give is, whilst the county faces the challenge around COVID, we've got some really detailed plans in place. We are still offering full service. We're seeing some impact in service delivery, but none of that is critical at this point, and we've got a range of plans which mean we can continue to offer support across our sporting fixtures, events, festivals, and all of those as they resume. It is challenging for our staff, so we're looking internally around health and well-being and everything that we can do as we ask more from our staff through this challenging period.
So it's a tough period.
It is. It's very challenging, but unlike some other areas of business, we as the police don't say we are restricting or withdrawing business. We're offering full service delivery. But of course, that comes from our staff stepping forward and doing more. So we realise there's an impact to that, and we are working hard to try and make sure that we recognise the welfare and well-being impact and support them through what is a challenging period.
I think, Commissioner, I'd just sort of add to that. I think the 2 points are, we are still providing a full service. At no point throughout the pandemic have we ever had to restrict any of our services, but that is a challenge, and I think particularly as the Delta variant has increased in prevalence, we've had added pressure on our staff in terms of infection and abstraction. Dave's led this from day one of the pandemic. We've got all the infrastructure in place now around testing to get our people back into work as quickly as possible. But I'd just like to put on record how proud I am of our staff. They've absolutely stepped up, because it's not only the pandemic, this is the time when people are having annual leave. We've had staff working 12 hours, standing up to real demands, and they've absolutely stepped up to the plate in a sterling way, and we're very, very proud of them.
Yeah. Well, I hope we can formally minute that, Tim, our thanks to all the staff, and also minute our thanks to David Hartley, who's really sort of led on this and performed brilliantly, so we're most grateful for that, but it's a difficult time. Just on COP26, how long does that last?
It's a 3-week period, so really it's from the end of October, the preparation, where we send a range of specialist staff up to assist Police Scotland, and then we send the volume of our staff in terms of support then go for a fortnight period at the start of November.
Okay, it's another big chunk of time.
Oh, it is significant commitment.
Yeah. And all forces presumably are affected.
Oh, absolutely.
Similarly.
By proportion to the size of your force, you then
Yeah.
offer that mutual aid support. So yes, part of a national effort.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Moving on then to item 6. I don't think we've got any items to be considered in the absence of the public or the press. Sally, nothing there. 7, declarations of interest. Are there any that we don't know about and should know about? Item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July, the last meeting, pages 1 to 10 in the pack. I've just got one observation on that. That's page 6. I think we recorded something probably the wrong way around. Page 6, and it's para 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about the middle of the page. The Commissioner inquired about the vacancy rate in Rotherham. Rotherham is at about 90%. We don't think they meant 90% were absent. We think that only 10% were absent, so we'll correct the minute accordingly. But apart from that, I've got no other comments on the minutes. Does anyone else have a reflection on the minutes? If not, can we accept those as a true and correct record? Moving on then to item 9, matters arising, actions from the minutes. This is page 11. And Michelle, I see you've joined us. I don't know whether you want to comment on this. Michelle, fresh from a field somewhere in Dorset, where
Cornwall and Dorset, yes, thank you, Commissioner.
where you claim you by chance bumped into the PCC.
For Dorset?
By chance?
Yes, he's a very tall man.
Well,
He was canvassing public opinion on his priorities for his new peace and crime plan.
well, I hope you gave him the benefit of your tourist advice.
So, Commissioner, action 412 can now be discharged. That related to domestic abuse arrest rates and your request that future reports contain details of numbers as well as percentages. So we've seen that that's been included in James's report for Barnsley on today's agenda. Item 415, the number of perpetrators on the MATAC programme. I just wondered if SYP could comment on that one. I don't believe we've had an update, Sal, on 415.
I can update you on that.
Okay, do you want to do that now?
I can, yes. So the MATAC programme, just to familiarise what that is, it's a multi-agency tasking and coordination meeting that is we introduced in February this year. And the whole purpose of the MATAC programme is to stop the cycle of offending by perpetrators of domestic abuse. So you've asked for the numbers of perpetrators on the programme. So since February 21, Sheffield have had 22 people on the programme, Doncaster have had 13, Rotherham and Barnsley have equally had 10 each. Now, that's not to say they're on the programme now, because they tend to work on a basis of 4 to 5 offenders being on that programme due to resourcing and the services that we rely on with partnership agencies. So that hopefully gives you a bit of an idea of the scope.
Yes, it does. So the 4 to 5 is because of staffing restraints.
Yeah, there's only so many people that we would actively be able to work with because it can be quite intensive. Support mechanisms that we work with partners, visits to them that we undertake to try and make sure that they're not repeat offending, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you very much. Michelle.
Commissioner, the next one is 417. You'd asked for an update on Rotherham's ASB victim care pilot. That's now scheduled in the work programme for Rotherham's next report, so I suggest that could be discharged here, Commissioner. Final action 418. Temporary ACC Thorpe was going to provide an update on whether speed awareness courses would continue to be run remotely. Dan, I don't know whether you've got an update on that for us.
I have. Michelle, yes, current courses are still online. It has to be said that since we introduced them online, the take-up of the courses has been remarkably improved. And forces around the country, not just ourselves, see the benefits of online courses through the convenience of it, the uptake, the costs involved, all of which are less. So the future is expected to be a hybrid environment where we'll probably have 80% of those type of courses remaining online with 20% in the classroom. There is a national governing body, the National Driver Offender Retaining Scheme, which are the governing and accrediting body that are due to come out to forces or approach forces to choose between classroom or online courses, and we're anticipating that will be at the end of September, early October, where that choice of online versus classroom will be ready for forces to choose. So we're making an informed decision at that time.
But the idea is that people would be given the choice. You would offer.
I think so. Or I think we're going to have. I mean, we're waiting for the guidance from the accrediting body, but I think we'll have a say as well in relation to that. So we'll have to see what the parameters.
I mean, there must be some people who can't do it online because they haven't got the wherewithal, the knowledge, or whatever.
That's correct. So that's the reasons why the options of both, they still have to be there really. But we have certainly seen some benefits around the online ways of working.
And if people do it online and actually the link is they can't get the signal, then that is cancelled out then, isn't it? They have to start again. And does that affect the time? Because they have to do it within a certain time, don't they?
Yeah, I'd imagine that and I'll have to find out the detail around that when that happens, because that hasn't been brought to my attention of that happening. But they'd either get rescheduled or come in for a classroom-based one in the future, but I'm not sure how often that occurs.
Okay. But the queue of shame outside the New York Stadium then is likely to diminish as time goes by.
Yeah, I think the hybrid model is going to be the more realistic option that we're going to take.
Thanks very much. I think that completes everything, Michelle, on the actions.
Yes, Commissioner,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks. So moving on to some of the main reports we have today. Force performance, first of all, pages 13 to 22. This is the report from Barnsley, and James Abdi is here to answer questions on that. Can I say, first of all, James, thank you very much for the report. Barnsley sets a high bar when it comes to these reports, so I'm glad you're able to keep that up. They've always been brief and to the point and jargon-free and give us all the information we need, so thank you very much for that, first of all.
Thank you.
As in the past, we won't comment on everything because there's lots in the report, so I'll just pick out one or two things, and if I can take you to page 14 first of all, and this is the general overview. Just a word on 4.1. You speak there about levels of overtime, and I just wonder whether you could comment on that. I mean, just how sustainable is this going to be going forward?
I think, to put this in context really, that the summer period for the force is going to be a really, really challenging period for a whole number of reasons, and notwithstanding the challenges that are brought about by the impact of COVID restrictions easing, the challenge that we've had operationally around officers having to self-isolate on occasions. So there has been a need in the short term to make use of overtime to surge additional capacity to the force to make sure that we continue to deliver a really good, effective time of response to incidents, which is something that we are continuing to do. In terms of long-term sustainability around that, clearly that's not the solution for us organisationally, but we do, as an organisation, have broader plans in place, particularly through the Police Uplift programme, the work that's ongoing in terms of the pipeline of officers that are going through recruitment, training, mentoring, support that are starting to land with us. And I think it's reasonable to foresee that in the short to medium term, certainly through the summer into the early winter months, that's going to continue to be a challenge for us. But the benefits will come in the fullness of time when those officers are gaining experience and are available to deploy to incidents. And in that regard, it's one thing to sort of reasonably expect, and it would be easy to think that as soon as the officers land, they will be able to have an immediate impact. The reality is that those officers, when they land, will need a period of coaching, support, development to become operationally effective in role, which actually, for a period, may mean that it takes slightly longer to deal with some jobs than others. So there's a need to use some overtime in the short term to inject that additional capacity to enable us to get to a point when the additional resources come through, trained experience to be able to manage the demand going forward. So,
do we have any sense of how long it takes from the time when they land, as you put it, the new recruits, to the point where you can send them off on their own with confidence?
Yeah,
Perhaps I can answer that, because I've had quite a lot to do with the PQF programme, both particularly in terms of my previous role. So of those officers who joined us last autumn on the degree apprenticeship programme, 60% of those officers now are approaching independent patrol status. But even when they're independent patrol status, they're just starting out on that journey and still require adequate supervision. Perhaps if I can just and I won't steal James's thunder, just talk to the broader point of overtime, because often overtime seems a negative in terms of the policing constructs. Some of that overtime is always structural, because by the very nature of what we do with protracted investigations, it's necessary for people to stay on and deal with the job in hand. And the reason for all that is quite simply to provide the very best service to the member of the public, who's the victim, or the witnesses at the heart of that. But there's no getting away from it. Some of the overtime that you see incurred in recent months is not that. It's not structurally. It is about managing demand. And there's a couple of things come together. I think the impact of COVID and abstraction, and particularly some of the challenges we've had since the prevalence of the Delta variant, I think that's going to continue and will continue for some time. And because PEQF has completely changed the way that we train police officers, it takes, so those that joined us a year ago are only just starting to land on the eventual response teams in September. So it's taken a year, so it will take time for them to fully assimilate into everyday policing and start to contribute to that effort independently. And that's an elongated period of time. Under the previous ICIDP programme, it was much quicker. So there's been a bit of a time lag. So certainly our response teams particularly have felt the pinch over the summer. It'll start to relieve itself towards the end of the year, and we should hopefully see some of that non-structural overtime diminish.
I think the tricky thing is that in a sense there's overtime and overtime, and unless you have the footnote which explains it, people just looking at the figures will say, well, why are you underspending, let's say, on the numbers will come to Debbie's report shortly, and yet you're asking for overtime. It doesn't seem to add up and make sense to people. That was all.
Yeah, and as I say, some of that is about, you know, if you know, for example, James has had a very tragic incident this week, the very serious incident involving a 15-year-old boy. The officers who deal with that, deal with it right from the start, and it involves working very long hours, and that's all about making sure that we get justice and you know, provide the very, very best service to that family.
No, I get that, and I'm sure the public would get that one too. Okay, thank you very much. Shall we move on to page 15? You reference there 5.2 Operation Encompass, which is reporting of domestic abuse incidents into schools when they police come across that, which is good, and I'm glad to see that the Barnsley, is that all the Barnsley schools now are part of Operation Encompass?
Yeah, I mean it's still relatively new within Barnsley in terms of sort of only being in effect since April time. So whilst it's been rolled out across the borough, there is still a period of sort of bedding in and making sure that process is working, and obviously now in the sort of school holiday period. So it's something that we are constantly going to be looking at in the months ahead, just to make sure that we've got our processes right, to make sure that we understand areas where the take-up rate might not be as great, and that will come with some of the data and some of the performance information that we'll be developing around that.
No, it's good to read that. Can you tell me though what happens in school holidays when you haven't got a school to report this? Do you report something somewhere else?
No, I think and again this is about refining some of the process locally. I mean, the reality is that there's no, the schools will be off, there'll be nobody there, and the purpose of Encompass is to enable the teachers to actually spot the signs when the individual or the child returns into the school environment. So, and obviously if an incident was to occur during the summer period, there will be a time lag and a passage of time before there's that interaction with a teacher. So one of the things that we are looking at is the process around how do we, as a district, make sure that the school and the teachers are notified which pupils are being subject to an environment where domestic abuse has occurred during the summer period. So actually, when they return to the school environment, the teachers are fully briefed, fully aware, and can just start to spot some of those signs and make any necessary referrals or put additional support measures in
But
place.
there will be a social services involvement if there are children anyway. will there?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. The Encompass just enhances and builds on existing structures and processes that are already in place. So, and this is part of the refinement process for us as we go into the first.
And once you notify social services, is that it as far as the police are concerned, or do you follow that up? I mean, do social services take all these references?
So in terms of, we have a very, very close working relationship through our MASH, the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, where all incidents relating to children, vulnerable children, go through there, and we've got a co-located one at Barnsley, and in that environment that is considered to make sure that the absolute best support and help is there for the child through whichever services are needed in that circumstance. Clearly we've also developed our approach around domestic abuse, and to make sure that our domestic abuse teams are flagging up those vulnerable children, so that information can be shared through partners and appropriate mechanisms put in place.
So the MASH is the key.
So the MASH is the key
that,
around that.
So I think the important is when you have an incident of domestic violence where there's children concerned, it goes into the local referral unit, and a decision is then made. Does it require a multi-agency approach? Does it require a single agency approach? And there's a considered and structured response to that. And that happens 365 days a year. And it's a continuing process, encompasses that bit involved in the schools on top, because you know it prior to Encompass, it would be entirely possible that a child could have been at home the previous night, witnessed serious domestic violence, the police could have been called, you know, parents could have been arrested, and they go to school the following day, and the school doesn't know about it, and that's clearly not a situation.
It's a good scheme, and glad to see this. Good news.
And just further reassurance around that, in terms of our local referral unit, not only is it in the same room as the MASH, it's literally on the same bank of desks.
Oh, right.
So they are next to each other to be able to timely pass that information and discuss any issues as and when they arise.
Okay, thanks. On to same page, it's 5.3. You talk about 2 designated youth engagement officers. Glad to see a reference to youth engagement officers. Is that 2 for all the schools in Barnsley, or is this the start of it?
Yes, I think in terms of our broader approach around youth engagement, I think that's an important area for us, and you'll note also we've done a lot of work recently around our youth independent advisory group as well.
Yes.
In terms of the point in respect to sort of youth engagement in schools, yes, we have 2 at the moment in time. They form part of our existing neighbourhood policing team structures, and one of the things that I'll be looking at with our Chief Inspector for Neighbourhoods is to make sure that we've got a real good strategy around youth engagement across the board, to make sure that we've got sufficient provision and the numbers of youth engagement officers to cover the schools that need to be covered. But it's not just a dedicated role for each school, it forms part of the partnership neighbourhood policing environment that the officers work in, but clearly the youth engagement officers have a real focus around which school they're targeting and why.
Okay. Page 17, 6.2. This is under the Tackling Crime and Antisocial Behaviour main headline, and you have an initiative there which was undertaken in June, the 12 Streets initiative, to try and do something about burglary offences, reducing burglary offences. I just wonder how that had gone, whether it had an effect.
Yes, and I think it's one of the things that I'm wanting us to look at is when we try and test any new initiatives, is to look at the evidence base and the impact of those. Clearly, in terms of a focus on reducing offending for burglary in Barnsley, that has previously been and continues to be an area of focus. The work that we've done over recent months, you will note there, we've had quite a significant reduction in offending of about 50 offences on the previous quarter, which is a good reduction of about 17%. Now, I'm not saying that all of that is attributable to the work that's been done as 12 Streets, and one of the things that I want to look into in further detail is how we can do an evidence-based evaluation of this and use the initiative as and when new hotspots start to emerge across the borough. So it's the positive anecdotal feedback that we've had is that it's worked very, very well. It's very much a positive sort of partnership working approach that we've put in place. We've received some really good feedback from residents, and sort of the 248 homes that were visited, 92% sort of gave us real positive feedback in that regard. But I do think this needs a little bit more evaluation going forward, so we can really test, does this tactic and initiative have a identifiable evidence-based reduction in the offences of burglary in that particular geographic area?
And presumably also, does it just displace these burglars? Do they start to operate somewhere else?
Yeah.
That would have to be watched as well.
Absolutely, but I think the broader point, and again, since arriving in Barnsley, I'm not seeing increased patterns, trends, emerging series around burglary. It is very much an area that when we identify or start to see an emerging issue, we, through our tasking processes, target that with our neighbourhood officers, with our response officers, with our detectives, and also with our intelligence resources to make sure we identify, arrest and maximise opportunities to bring people to justice. So that displacement effect we've not really seen, if I'm honest, because whilst we've been reducing, we've not seen one area pop up and that area reduce.
No.
So it is positive in that regard, but I would like us to do a bit more evaluation.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll be interested in
more broadly across the force. We've got some very good examples of evidence-based work around residential burglary. Chief Inspector Paul Ferguson led a programme across 12 of our most affected wards around residential burglary. It was supported by the University of Central Lancashire in terms of applying a really structured problem-solving approach, and that's had academic evaluation that shows certainly some of the initiatives have been really, really successful, looking at how do you nudge people into different types of behaviour around securing homes. I'm sure that he'd be happy to come and give you a broader briefing around the impacts of that.
The research
particularly successful, certainly North West Sheffield saw some really significant results around that, but we can certainly arrange that for you.
Lovely, thank you very much. On to 6.5, hate crime. You say it remains a priority, etc. I wonder if I could ask you a kind of philosophical question. Do you want recorded hate crime statistics to go up or down?
I mean, in terms of that, for me, hate crime offences being recorded and increasing is a sign of a positive.
So you want them to go up?
Yes, because that for me is about victims having the confidence to come forward, so we understand the true extent of what hate crime is actually happening in society. Without that, you only get a portion of the picture.
Now, I get that. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if you say, we want people to report it, therefore your recorded hate crimes go up. So the public say, well, they're going up. Why aren't you doing something about it?
I think
it's really difficult.
From my perspective, in all the years I've been a police officer, I've never yet seen a report that suggests anything other than hate crime is vastly underreported. That is simply a fact of the matter. Often hate crime is spontaneous, sporadic in nature. It's about things that people are called in the street, and it's important that we get a good understanding of what's actually happening out there. So from my perspective, I do want to see people come forward and have confidence to report hate crime to us. What I also want to see is that they get a very good service, and at the conclusion of that investigation, they've got a high level of satisfaction with the action that South Yorkshire Police has taken. And that's not necessarily about us being able to catch everyone, but what I do want to see is a high standard of investigation, a very high standard of victim care, and people feeling like they've been taken seriously.
So is the real test and measure then victim satisfaction and care, rather than simply the recorded number of hate incidents and hate crimes?
I think if hate crime is going down, my immediate concern is that people are not reporting it to us. People get fed up not reporting us. They think that it's a waste of our time.
It is difficult though, isn't it? Because I go to community meetings and they will look at the recorded figures and say, it's going up. What are you doing about it? And then you say, well, we're actually trying to encourage people to report. They do not. It's very hard to get that message across to the public. But if we focus on victim satisfaction, that may be a way. I don't know whether that's
absolutely. And I think there's because Andy Berryman, who now leads on hate crime, obviously Sarah Pillman is now temporary ACC, led on it for a good number of years. We've got a wide degree of partners involved in our structures to tackle hate crime, and I think when you talk to them, and they get confidence that we take this seriously. For me, it is about being satisfied that we've got a proper infrastructure, that we've got the support of partners, that people have confidence to come and report, that when they do report to us, they get a appropriate response, that makes sure they're signposted in terms of the support that can be provided for victims of hate crime. And often what you find is that when someone reports, it's not the first time they've reported, because they've been a repeated victim of hate crime, and that's got to be stopped. We've put so much resources into our neighbourhood policing structures over the last couple of years. There's an absolute expectation from me, particularly neighbourhood inspectors, that they understand who are the victims of hate crime within their neighbourhood. In particular, they understand where they've had repeat victims of hate crime, and certainly when there's a repeat victim of hate crime, there's an expectation that they're actually proactively doing something about it to prevent it happening again.
Yeah, that's really serious, because we've had, not here, but elsewhere in the country, where they have been ignored, and so it has led to serious crime, really serious crimes.
And this is the issue: is that unless you get people reporting and you get that picture, that intelligence picture of what's actually happening, you can compare offences with offences. It's very difficult then to be able to direct proactively resources to prevent it happening again, and that's what it's about. Prevention of this is what we're about.
No, I understand that, but it is a conundrum, I think, how we report on hate crime. And,
just on the point, Commissioner, around satisfaction, and just returning to your point, then page 19, 7.3 there again, just some assurance to yourself and the public there that within Barnsley our satisfaction levels remain very high, and exceptional really, at 83% across all groups, but in particular you'll note there that in relation to hate crime, satisfaction rates are at 100%, and for vulnerable victims at 92%. So I think again that assurance there that the quality of service, that once victims have the confidence to report it and to come forward, to know that when they do that, they're going to be listened to, they're going to be treated fairly, and the service that we're going to give is going to be the absolute best that is possible.
I did note and underline that. Yes, that's a remarkable statistic.
I think a good measure of the effectiveness of our hate crime response is the disparity between satisfaction levels in the general sense of victims of crime and those for hate crime, because nationally there's a significant gap. People with the victim of hate crime are less likely to be satisfied with the police response than a victim of burglary, for example. That gap, I think nationally, is about 15%. It's about 6% in South Yorkshire, so we're narrower than most forces. But in terms of targeting our efforts, we could get that to zero. That would be great.
Okay. Thank you. On page 18, this is 610 little 2, responding to concerns of ASB, and you mentioned that to help tackle the problem in this particular area, officers successfully apply for a partial closure order. I just wonder how easy or difficult they are to get, partial closure orders.
Yeah, I think as with any sort of order, there needs to be a real clear support and intelligence and evidence basis for it to satisfy the courts. It needs to be a proportionate measure to tackle the specific problem that it's sought to do, and where we do that, we don't take these out lightly. We really do target it around to either tackle a particular problem, or in this case to actually offer some additional support to a vulnerable person, because the circumstances around this particular one is that somebody had a degree of vulnerability around them, was sort of receiving visits from unwanted people, which was actually impacting on local crime and disorder in that area, and the partial closure order which was obtained enabled us to actually provide support by restricting other people from coming to the address. They didn't really have a reason to be there, i.e. allowing the individual, their family, the supports from other agencies to come, but to restrict other people that were actually causing a problem in that regard. So we don't take them lightly when we go for them. We're very sort of sensitive and considered around, are there other solutions that are available? I mean, we'd only do it where it's proportionate in the circumstance, and this was clearly a case.
How many a year would there be of these? They're very infrequent, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to do a further work to get some specific information if you require that. But
no, not particularly, just to get some sense of they're not very often.
It's part of a suite of tools that our neighbourhood teams would use within sort of an agreed approach to problem solving. We sort of look for which is the most appropriate tool or combination of tools to achieve a problem. So we don't get them very, very often, but when we do, they can be very helpful and very effective at supporting a broader plan around problem solving.
Across the force, we're quite proactive in terms of pursuit of civil orders, not just in terms of you're well aware of how we pursue domestic violence protection notices, for example. But we having invested significantly in our legal department, our joint legal department with Homicide Services, we have a number of lawyers in there who are very, very skilled now at obtaining such orders, and are very, very proactive with our neighbourhood teams in terms of supporting them right from the outset around what the options might be. And we record them all on Connect now, so we can certainly get you some up to date statistics on where we are, not just in Barnsley but right across the force.
Yes, it did seem a useful tool, but I could see that you have to make a really strong case
You
to do this.
But the advantage that we have now by having that expertise within our in-house legal department is that the lawyers can get involved with the neighbourhood team right from the outset, and they're very proactive in terms of going out to districts, explaining who they are, what they can bring, and it's very much a team effort. So as with all things, if you start your investigation, your problem solving plan with the fact that a closure order might be the solution, you can start gathering the evidence for that right at the start. That then means that by the time you get to a court and are making that request, you've got a properly structured case that more often than not is successful. And when we've gone for these orders, we have a very high success level in terms of getting them.
James, I did leave on the desk, which you probably picked up, an email from a satisfied Barnsley resident. I thought you
I'm grateful for that, thank you.
See that.
I announced it before the meeting, thank you for the feedback.
Almost at the end of your report, on page 20, stop and search, I was just a little bit puzzled here by a statistic. It's the first paragraph, 710. 1 in every 62 people in Barnsley have had this interaction with the police. I can see how you've got this figure. You've divided the number of stops and searches into the population as a whole, but I just wonder whether it was true. Are none of these repeat stops and searches?
And I think this is very, very raw information in terms of during the whole calendar year, 3,716 searches. That would equate to sort of 1 in 62. But if you put that into more manageable numbers, we're talking in the region of about 71 searches being carried out per week by officers. And a number of those will potentially be on individuals that are involved in crime. The intelligence enables us and supports targeted police action against those because of that proportionality issue that we alluded to earlier. So this doesn't mean that for every 62, 1 in every 62 people in Barnsley are going to get... That's the danger of the statistic, isn't it? If I go into Barnsley Market, every 62nd person
the use of stop and search.
The use of stop and search in Barnsley is something that we are very sensitive about. We understand the impact. It's one of the reasons why we're doing a lot of work around youth engagement in particular. As I mentioned earlier on, we've established a youth independent advisory group, and part of that has been talking about stop and search and having discussions around how it's used and why it's used. So we have that level of engagement, not only to sort of the process and why, but also the feedback that's being received in relation to the use of it. And some of the performance information that's in there regarding the outcomes for that is quite positive in terms of the percentage and proportion of the searches that are actually resulting in a positive outcome, i.e. offences that are suspected to amount to criminal nature have been identified, which shows that as a district we are very sort of targeted around focusing on suspected offenders, not general members of the public going about their own business. honest, that is not what stop and search is like in Barnsley. And that is, again, a further area where continued scrutiny into this area is something that we will continue to do. So I'm assured
you mentioned those youth ING earlier. Some of your young people in Barnsley are very articulate. I met some in Lock Park during the lockdown, when the restrictions were on. We had a meeting, social distance meeting in Lock Park. Very articulate young people, and gave us a really good grilling and run around. So
I've got to say, the sort of youth engagement in Barnsley across the partnership is excellent. And one of the first few meetings I was at recently, a partnership sort of executive meeting, had sort of members from local youth communities actually presenting at the meeting as well, and giving views and opinions, and came across very, very well. So
okay, thank you. The very last thing I want to say is, well, thank you for the report. I just wondered where you've only been in post for a short period of time, but I just wondered where you saw now the challenges going forward for Barnsley District.
Yeah. There's a few challenges to look
maybe
forward
too
to.
early.
No, but I think there's a few that sort of stand out at the moment, but I think at the moment as well I'm still sort of forming a view more broadly around the areas that we may need to focus in. The first thing I would say around all of that is that having since arrived at Barnsley, I'm really sort of pleased with the way that the district has been run previously and the way that it's working effectively with partners. Excellent relationships already with the partnership and working through a number of issues one at a time to make sure that we bring a sort of shared approach to problems. So I think that's a real strength, and that is a key thing that people can take confidence from. We've already alluded to one really in the short-term challenge. It will be around the need to sort of manage operational demand through the summer period into winter as the new officers start to come through. And I think more broadly, and only yesterday we were having discussions around sort of emerging threats in line with your priorities, particularly around protecting vulnerable people and the challenge around child criminal exploitation, county lines, not just in Barnsley but across the force, regionally and nationally, is of a concern. And we're certainly doing some work to look at our existing capabilities that we have and how we may be able to look at options going forward to make sure that we bolster that, working with partners. So I'm very assured that everything that I seem to have inherited, both within the police as a standalone agency and the partnership work, is very positive. Clearly there are things that we will continue to focus on and refine with partners as we move forward. But I think those issues around public protection, child neglect, child exploitation are very much at the forefront of driving our operational plans and strategic plans more broadly about where we invest in the future.
Good. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the report, which, as I say, is what we've come to expect from Barnsley, a good, crisp, brief and jargon-free report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Shall we move to... Oh, you're very welcome to stay or go, James.
Okay, fine.
Moving on to item 11 then. Tim, this is for you, pages 23 to 42.
I think this is Dan actually going to do the PVP
Is it Dan?
report.
Okay. Dan, thank you. Again, we won't dwell on everything, couldn't do that, but if I can take you to one or two things. I just wondered if on page 24 you could say something around, this is 3.4 I think, PVP generally and how things are, whether somewhere in here you talk about, in that paragraph in fact, about the uplift in staff and PVP which is coming through, but presumably not all there yet. I just wondered if you could say something about how you're coping in the short term.
Certainly, it's important to state the paragraph 3.4 talks about the uplift in staff within our PVP performance and governance team, which is a team that sits centrally. So what we've done there is we've increased the staffing of 2 civilian police auditors, and there's real importance around that to carry out qualitative audits on a range of PVP related investigations, because obviously we're conscious of not only monitoring the figures and the service that we provide to the victims, but like Deputy has already referenced, the quality of the investigations has to be really on point. So the way we do that is we haven't got a computer system that will tell us, the sort of levels of quality of the investigation, so the auditors will do that for us. Also, we've increased the capability within the central PVP performance governance team by an additional DCI, Detective Chief Inspector. So now we have two, and that's really important because one can focus on the child aspect around the child neglect, child exploitation type offences, and the other DCI is going to focus on the adult side of things. More broadly speaking, I know we've referenced the detective challenge, which is a national issue, and we've previously touched on that, I think, in previous PABs. I mean, the positive thing is our positive drive and focus on the recruitment campaign and the PQF programme. So eventually, like's already been referenced, those officers will come through and we'll be able to move people into more bespoke posts, which includes PVP. So we know that there are positive things happening in the future. But it goes without saying that, yes, we are concerned around the shortage of detectives amongst our workforce, and we monitor that closely. And we're always looking to continue to explore ways of recruiting more detectives into the organisation, which is going to be an ongoing thing as we move forward.
And that is a national thing. We have talked about it before. Is there any sense at all that it's easing or getting better, that shortage? Or
my view is it still remains as much a challenge as it was, and we are continuing with our TI programme. We're continuing the support for people who wish to become detectives internally. We've had a fast track investigation officer to detective programme. We are taking a number of cohorts of police now detectives, which is proving reasonably successful in terms of getting people into the organisation. Our first objective is to be able to fill the detective post that we've got vacant at the moment, but we're also acutely conscious that many of our growth plans that will manifest themselves later this year and into 22-23 also include expanding some of our detective units, particularly within SCS, and we will need to generate more. So it remains a constant challenge. I'm not aware of any force really that's doing stuff that we're not. It just remains an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Thank you. I'm looking at the bottom of 24. This is violence against women and young girls section, and you talk in 3.9 about the VRU, the OPC and the force leads recently joined together to design a public survey which is asking for residents' perceptions of safety. I just wonder if you could say a little bit about that, how that's being, whether it's being targeted, how representative you think that will be, what you hope to learn from that.
Sure, well, it's always a challenge to get a truly representative return on surveys. I mean, I'm really quite pleased with the return that we got from that survey. We've got well over 1,900 responses, and 77% of those were from women. I do acknowledge, however, that the survey is not truly representative of the population of South Yorkshire. For example, we had a low response from members of our communities from an ethnic background, but on the other hand, we have got a reasonable number of returns covering each age category. So we got a useful return size so that we were able to glean some quite useful information. We used our service around community alerts, so people that have signed up to community alerts, we've advertised and sent them the link for the survey, as well as using our social media channels to market the survey. And one of the things that we were really keen on doing was to measure perceptions of everybody. Obviously, the ethos of the report is to ascertain the views of women and girls. Undoubtedly that's really important, but we encouraged the vast majority of people that sign up to our alerts and link into our social media to take part in the survey. And I am encouraged that 3/4 of the respondents were from women, so we're using that to great effect to decide on how we use our resources going forward.
Okay, thank you. Page 26, domestic abuse offences, recorded volumes, and you've got a graph there, chart there. I just wonder if you could say something about where you think that line ought to be in a year or two's time. What's the aspiration?
That's a really good question. I mean, We work on force forecasts as part of the force management statement that is a document that we produce annually, where we try and predict where things are going. And as always, already referenced with regards to hate crime, we encourage people to report domestic abuse. And the forecast that we work on and review each year does suggest that domestic abuse related demand will continue to rise in the years to 2024 at least, although the rate of increase since 2017 is unlikely to be replicated, because we did see quite a sharp rise in those years, 2017-18. So we do expect the force levels to increase up to 2024 to around 24,500 maybe of cases. I mean, the important thing to note is that we work really hard to try and encourage the public who may witness or be a victim of domestic abuse to report this type of crime. As an example, a recent domestic abuse campaign was launched by our Violence Reduction Unit on the 14th of May, and that saw, for 8 weeks, we tried to encourage anyone experiencing or witnessing domestic abuse to come forward who may need access to help and support. We used some real life stories of victims within South Yorkshire that gave a really good account of their experience, not only the tragic circumstances of their experience, but also their experience of working with us to try and promote people to come forward. So yes, I mean, we are seeing increases in domestic abuse, which can be seen now when you compare where we are now from 2019. And we have seen increases after the pandemic has eased, where people are more able to come forward.
I mean, I could perhaps just add my view on that. All the academic research that I've ever seen around domestic abuse suggests that people are the victim on multiple occasions before they're reported to the police. So, you know, that is why we put so much effort in terms of encouraging people to report, and why we put so much emphasis on that early intervention by our officers when people do report, and the whole of our DA Matters training, which we rolled out to most of the workforce over the past year. It is absolutely focused on the need to separate victim and perpetrator and be able to bring in third-party interventions to try and solve the issue. So I'd like to see that continued trend of higher levels of reporting. What I look for, though, and what we will look for, is how do we deal with repeats? Because if you've got high level of reporting, high levels of satisfaction with outcomes, and lower levels of repeat domestic violence, that for me is a measure of how effective the force is in terms of managing it.
Again, it's one of those things where a more sophisticated response or a way of setting this out is demanded, I think, for public understanding and explanation. Okay. Thank you. Can we go on to child protection, which is page 27, 3.25. You speak there about the force has been working closely with, and then you list various organisations, NSPCC, Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, and so on, to create a training course. That seems very good, and I just wonder whether that's going to be made available elsewhere to other forces.
Yes, I mean, I think we should be really proud of this development and this training course. We've mirrored what we've done with domestic abuse. So this is sort of focused on child matters. That's the title of it. I presented with a colleague to DCC, the Deputy Chief Constable of Merseyside, Ian Critchley, who's the National Policing Lead for Child Protection, on the 22nd of July, where we relayed to him the steps that we've taken and the plan of our Child Matters programme. And he is currently in consultation with the College of Policing and consideration about rolling this out nationally. We have already been approached by half a dozen forces inquiring about this course, so I anticipate it will probably end up being rolled out nationally. More locally here, the trainer sessions start at the end of this month, and we start rolling this training out in September. We're hoping to have everyone, all the training concluded around April time next year. So we're looking at around 3,000 staff going through that training. Every public-facing member of staff and police officer will undergo that training. And also, of course, what's really important is we've developed this with partners in all 4 local authorities, and we've invited and opened the door for them to also participate in the training. So it's been a really positive step change, this.
No, that's really good, and so congratulations and thanks to everyone all around.
I think as well, Commissioner, if you set that in the context of what we're going to do with child matters training, what we've commissioned and rolled out for in terms of DA matters, and also what we've developed in terms of training our neighbourhood officers, what we can then demonstrate is a really comprehensive approach to professional skills development for our frontline officers on those areas that matter most to the public around problem solving, dealing with neighbourhood crime, and making sure that we deal with vulnerable people quickly and effectively.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. But, thank you. I'm on to page 28, rape and serious sexual offences, 3.28. The RASO gatekeeper, we've mentioned this before, and I get a bit puzzled by this. The RASO gatekeeper, as I understand it, is someone who is reviewing or looking at those cases, serious sexual abuse cases, which are not backed by the CPS. Is that the role and reviewing that? Tell me what the RASO gatekeeper.
The RASO gatekeeper is a central role to make sure that quality assures our files before they go to the CPS, and to make sure that we've got a single point of contact, that we are set the files that we are sending to the CPS for serious sexual offences of a consistent standard.
Okay. But there's one RASO gatekeeper.
Yeah.
So she is seeing a very small number of cases.
Definitely there's issues around the flow of cases through the organisation, so we think that there is more cases that the RASO gatekeeper should be seeing. Too many of them are not making it to the RASO gatekeeper, and we think we want to get more to the CPS. Ultimately, where we want to get to is more cases going to the CPS of sufficient standard with sufficient evidence to be able to get a judicial outcome. We know this is an issue nationally.
Yeah.
Much has been made of it.
So the gate is not involved in reviewing those cases that are rejected by the CPS.
They will have a look at some. They will have a look at some of them, but primarily the role is about ensuring that the files that we do send to the CPS are of consistent standard.
And is one person sufficient?
I can touch on that. Obviously, the RASO gatekeeper also works proactively, so he regularly engages with the district PVP, so DSs and DIs around a number of their ongoing RASO type offences. But we've recognised that what we want to do is, you picked up on the point around those that don't go to CPS. So we've currently recruited a detective constable to support that role, and they start on the 6th of September. And the purpose of that will be to set up scrutiny panels. So it's allowing us the capability with partners and district PVP representatives to look into those cases that don't go through to CPS.
So it's not so much that they're not backed by the CPS, it's that the SYP don't put them to.
It could be, yeah, it could be a combination of both. Right. So we really want to get into that and tease out opportunities for learning, trends, so that the role of the DC will support the RASO in doing that, because we do identify that as something that we really want to do.
It does seem rather crucial then, this work, given all our anxieties about rape and the lack of convictions of convictions. And so on.
Absolutely, and we recognise that. It's a national issue. Certainly, all the evidence is about the very, very low number of allegations of rape and serious sexual offending that actually result in conviction. It's incredibly low. The number of cases that are charged and actually get to court are incredibly low. The reasons for that are vast and complex. We have detectives working extremely hard to investigate these offences, but they are complex by nature, and we recognise that in terms of formulating our response to this and raising our game, we need to put some more resources around it. I don't think it's as simple as enhance the gatekeeper function. I think there's bits that need to be done out of districts with PVP teams. There's the skills and capabilities of supervision within district PVP teams. There's the central gatekeeping role and how that operates, and then there's our ongoing partnership with the CPS. And the degree to which we get early intervention.
Nevertheless, you must be learning things from what the gatekeeper is finding.
And feeding that back out, and the DC that we've recruited will assist with that and facilitate. I mean, we're already holding very regular meetings with district PVP teams to share some of the learning that the RASO gatekeeper is finding. So making sure that that, as the Dep said, staff are engaged and they're up to date with training, and that we are continually reviewing what we're finding. And my cases aren't succeeding, that gets fed back.
I mean, it's obviously a national issue as well as an issue here, but it's clearly one which the public is wanting us to focus on, government wants us to focus on, so I think something we'll return to, no doubt about that. Okay, thank you. On page 29, 3.36 at the bottom of the page, as part of the review of the forces audit processes, where the quality delivery takes centre stage, performance and government departments working with colleagues in the force call centre to undertake a dip sample review of different crime categories. I wonder if the findings of that could be shared with the OPCC. We do our own work in that area, and that would be just useful.
Absolutely, and just to put some context around that, this is focused on something the HMIC, our inspectorate, is adopting around the victim service assessment, they're calling it. So it's in relation to the service that goes from start to finish, cradle to grave. And what we really wanted to do was understand that ourselves. So those audits normally get reported into the Force Performance Day, which, as you know, happens monthly, and which members of your office come and attend. So we'll pick it up through that, or we can brief you on that.
Thank you. Over the page 30, 3.40, you mentioned Operation Patronage. I wonder if you could just say a brief word about what that is, what they do, what's how effective.
Operation Patronage is where we engage and train and support certainly members of the nighttime economy. Excuse me. For example, security staff at late night opening venues, and the whole purpose of that is to spot possibly members of the community that are under the influence of alcohol, that are on their own, and they offer support to those individuals to try and prevent, to secure their safety and seek safe routes home. So that's what Operation Patronage is focused on.
Okay, and successful?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's early days. It's something that we've recently adopted, and obviously as the COVID restrictions have eased and the nighttime economy has kicked in again, a lot of these places are reopening, so we're re-engaging with the staff and making sure that training continues. So that will be a continual programme.
Moving on swiftly to page 33, missing persons now. Really a question to yourself, I think. You did a lot of work in Doncaster when you were there around children missing from some of the private children's homes. I know you were involved with Ofsted as well as the providers as well. I just wondered whether that had continued, whether that had fallen away, whether we're doing the same thing across the county or just where we're at.
I know that, first of all, the work that we started in Doncaster, where we sat down with all the managers of the private and local authority children's homes with Ofsted, just really to try and do things better and protect children as much as we can. That has rolled out and morphed into those type of conversations in the other districts. And I know, for example, James will be able to talk about the local partnerships that he's got and the meetings that he has with children's homes and local authority partners around this issue. But just to touch on where that has gone, because again there's a national picture here, that has led to us engaging with the MPCC lead for this area of policing, who is based in West Yorkshire, and they are currently working with an independent children's home association, which is a national body, where we're developing, and what I was really keen to do is to make sure that we get this good practice out to the rest of the country. And they're trying to develop up what they're calling a Concord Act, which is basically a set of standards that will put us best placed to protect children, that will hopefully roll up nationally. And it's something that, because of my change of role, I've sort of left with others to pursue. But I'll recontact the lead and see where that's got.
Yeah, it'd be a shame if it fell away in some way, but not all the private children's homes are members of that association, are they?
No, they're not. I mean, the ICHA do talk about the percentage terms of how many of those private children's homes are members, which I can't remember the exact figure, but it's quite a high percentage. So they do represent quite a big remit of private children's homes. But that's why the local management and the accountability is so important. Those relationships need to be built by the districts themselves, which comes into its own.
Okay, thank you. On page 36, I'm just slightly puzzled by the chart at the top. What's the difference between the light blue, dark blue and the reds. What's
Now,
all that
I
about?
did produce this chart, and I was posing the same question to myself. Now,
Oh.
I've looked at this, and Smart Contact, our system where we can monitor calls, has enabled us to assign a mental health qualifying code to instance linked to mental health. So that is basically what this graph is showing, the demands over time around those instances that have a mental health element to them. And it appears for me the colours are used to follow the COVID restriction periods. So for example, in the 23rd of March 2020, the Prime Minister announces the first lockdown. Towards the end of June, things reopen. In November 2020, I think the second national lockdown, Dave, is that right? Can you remember? The second national lockdown comes into force. So, I mean, I think it's basically trying to indicate the effect of what lockdown may or may not have produced. And for me, that is fairly consistent.
Yeah, I thought it might be that, but it was slightly mysterious, that's all, in that there was no reference to the colours in the explanation. Okay. Just while we're on this page, mental health issues, which we're talking about. Mental health doesn't feature in the national policing requirement, does it? It's not one of the... I mean, is that... Do you regret that? Is the effect of that national policing requirement going to distort, therefore, local priorities? Because this is not in there, and we would regard this as really rather important.
I agree, and I think mental health is fundamentally important. And you only have to look at the prison population, where the vast majority of people in that population, unfortunately, has at least one or two mental health ailments for that. And the prevalence of mental health of detainees in our custody suites are there to see, which is why we've got liaison diversion services and other support mechanisms within that environment. So it's really important to us. And it goes without saying that a lot of the cases that, and actually it's referenced in the papers there around the programme 999 What's Your Emergency, that really illustrated the types of calls that our officers deal with, a lot of which are associated with people suffering from some form of mental illness or mental ill health. So it is really important to us. And that local scrutiny is so important for us in South Yorkshire, which is why we were one of the first forces in the country to sit down and form a partnership under the Integrated Care Partnership that we still sit around the table. And this is an opportunity for us to engage with mental health commissioners, the Mental Health Trust, to try and tease out better ways of working. So, you only have to look at the number of people that we detain under the Mental Health Act, which suggests that that is of paramount importance. So that focus will remain. And just to prove that and to reassure you, we cover mental health within the district quarterly performance reviews. So we look at things like how many people we detain, number of incidents that involve mental health, the kind of relationships that we have locally, even going down to the transportation that we use, which I know we've covered in this meeting previously. So it will still remain a priority area for South Yorkshire.
Again, it's contributed to our challenge over the last few months, particularly post-lockdown, because whilst we've had challenges with abstraction, so many of our partners have as well. So whilst we're not, and you've seen the data that we don't bring people with mental health issues to the police station anymore, the time taken to actually take them to places of safety and get them booked in because of staff shortages driven by primarily by COVID abstractions, has increased that demand and the abstraction from officers being able to get back out on the road and answer more calls for service. It's just to make you aware of that, really.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think it is something that presents a problem, that there's measures that may affect priorities if we're not careful with it. I'm on page 41 now, and this is yes, I was out yesterday in the Corton Wood area talking to some local councillors. A couple of local councillors were very complimentary of the police and the work that we've done in the Dearne Valley with boy races and all that sort of business. But they were talking about 101 and how they report, essentially, and they tried to get onto the portal that we have, which involves setting up an account. And they were saying they really did think South Yorkshire Police were missing a trick here, because a lot of people can't be bothered with that, find it awkward and difficult, takes a lot of time for them to do it, etc. Why can't you have, they say, just a simple means of making contact with SYP so we can type our complaint in and you've got it. Now, I don't know whether...
I would like to think, Commissioner, we've made that access and contact as easy as it could be. You have to reference, so if you're making contact with any idea of a follow-up to a contact for a service, you've got to leave some form of detail. So that initial registration is very simple to then access the portal.
It's partly also they wanted to remain anonymous.
Okay, well, there is Crime Stoppers.
No, they don't want to go through Crime Stoppers because they feel that's remote. It's somewhere else, and it eventually gets back to SYP. So they want to go to SYP direct, but anonymously, and not have to go through all this business of the
Okay, there's a request for service there because Crime Stoppers is not remote. We have a very dynamic link with Crime Stoppers, and that information is fed through. I mean, the other point I would make is we've opened up all of our neighbourhoods. So in terms of, you go onto the website, if you've got local issues around any concerns, you can have the inspector, their mobile number, their email contact, the sergeant, the constable, the PCSO.
They say the local neighbourhood officers, not necessarily there, but other places where I've been, say that not all officers are willing to give those mobile numbers, and you get a mobile number and you ring them and they're on annual leave.
Oh, they may be, and that's the challenge with anybody who works. You're not there 24 hours.
You're not, but there doesn't seem to be a mechanism which will tell you they're on and therefore dial this number rather than...
Okay, I mean, in terms of that contact, they're all on the website. So the email contacts, the telephone contacts are all there.
So my answer to...
And there will be an out of office. So if you send an email to a local officer, if they're on holiday, an out of office reply will come back to tell you how long they're out of the office for, so people would be aware by return.
And will it have an alternative route for them on that email?
That is normally shared across teams. So if, for example, a constable in a neighbourhood team isn't there, they would then say there is the sergeant or another member of the team in their absence.
Okay.
I mean, I can certainly look at.
I think it's
almost a parallel of Crime Stoppers to create an anonymous local reporting mechanism when one that is highly effective and known as a brand is in place.
Well, it's something I've encountered a number of times now, and it was quite strongly put to me yesterday. I might get them to write down exactly what the issues are for them as local councillors and let you have
it's
it.
My concern is that
we want them to
anonymity around reporting a local issue that we want to work and update on. If it involves intelligence where they feel at risk, then there is the Crime Stoppers route.
Yes, I don't understand why they find that, why they don't want to go down that route. I mean, when I put that question to them, the answer was, it's not SYP. They want to come direct. So, I don't know. Maybe an explanation.
I'm happy to work with you on trying to fill that void.
Yeah, we'll have it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think that's everything, Tim, in that report, Dan. So, thank you very much indeed for that. Shall we move on then to item 12, which is, that came as a supplemental report. It's the kind of end of the year report, looking back. Tim, I don't know if there's anything you want to pick up from that. I wasn't proposing to spend a long time on this.
I think many of the issues in the report we've talked about, but perhaps if I just bring out a couple of highlights. Again, the first page or so talks about the challenges of policing the pandemic, the way that our staff have stepped up in terms of continuing to provide a full service. A couple of highlights really around DA matters which we talked about. I did just want to touch on the armed crime team, because we've sat around this table on many occasions and you've asked us questions, and sometimes urgent questions, about firearms discharges and serious violence, and as a result of particularly some of the challenges we were seeing in Sheffield last year, we invested in an armed crime team which came at a cost in terms of taking resources from elsewhere, but the impact of that in terms of the reduction of firearms discharges, particularly in Sheffield in the latter half of the year, I think has been really profound. And I think if you overlay the work that the armed crime team is doing alongside the violent crime task force in terms of tackling serious violence, and then you overlay the work that the violence reduction unit is putting in place in terms of dealing with that long-term approach to violence reduction, I think if you bring all that together, we've got quite a comprehensive approach now, both in the short term and the medium term, in tackling that particular issue. I think, and I know that we're going to be talking about it probably in more depth in September, around treating people fairly, but you will see in the report as well some of the challenges that we've had around recruitment. Whilst we are very, very pleased with the fact that we are on target in terms of uplift and we're getting lots of new people into the organisation, the calibre of the people that we are recruiting we're very, very pleased with. The one challenge that remains is about ensuring that we have a workforce that properly reflects the communities that we serve, and that remains a challenge. We've not necessarily seen the uplift in the number of recruits from black and minority ethnic backgrounds that we would want. We'll continue to redouble our efforts in that. We've just employed a positive action officer, that a coordinator. That individual is supported by a full-time police inspector now, whose sole role it is to coordinate events and undertake targeted activity around positive action for recruitment. That's supported by a positive action goal group that's chaired by the Chief Constable. So there's lots of work that we're doing to try and redouble our efforts in that, but that remains an ongoing challenge. Other than that, unless there are any particular points in the report that you would like me to expand on, I'll probably call it there. I think much of it we talked about during the course of the meeting anyway. Yeah,
I think we picked up on a lot, and it is a backward look at but just a couple of things. One was on page 12, 7.27. This is DCI Nikki Leach's work around Section 45 defence in criminal prosecutions to do with people caught up in trafficking and human slavery. And she says there, this defence is not always universally applied by the police, prosecutors or the courts. Is that a comment generally, or is it?
I think that was I mean, Nikki has been. She's now DCI at Doncaster, but was for a long time the detective sergeant running our modern slavery team. So she's absolutely passionate about this area of work. And our response around this, I think, is ahead of many other forces. But there is a general sense that people present as perpetrators of crime, but when you actually look beyond it, these people have been trafficked and forced into that crime. I don't think there's any point in hiding from the fact that, if you look at this over a period of time, certainly when I was an operational police officer, 10, 15, 20 years ago, no one even considered the whole concept of modern slavery, and it has been a journey that the police has come on. People who find themselves in these circumstances are victims, they're not perpetrators, and Section 45 provides a legal framework whereby we can recognise that and make sure that they're protected. Nikki's done a huge amount of work in terms of championing that, both locally here in South Yorkshire, but also through her academic studies and an engagement with the national leader on this on a national basis.
Yeah, but the specific comment about not routinely used, she's making a national comment.
It's a general sense,
yeah. Okay. So hopefully there'll be some improvement around that. And then, yes, you've referenced the armed crime team, which I was going to mention, but also, if I can find it, which I don't think I can, yes I can, page 13, mental health again, conveying people in police vehicles, which you referenced earlier in the meeting. I see it fell from 70% to 50%, so that's a really good thing.
It is.
Yeah, it is, and that is a national challenge. Because we appreciate how busy our colleagues in Yorkshire Ambulance Service are. We continue to try and work with them. The most important thing there for us in the police is to make sure that they are aware that we require the transportation and not assume that there's never an ambulance available. So it's getting that message. So we have our part to play in that as well. But we do appreciate the struggles that our colleagues in the ambulance service are in. So to gather that momentum is good and it's positive, and we just keep working with our partners around that.
Good. Thank you very much. I think that's all I wanted to say about that then, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on to item 13, which is budget monitoring. Debbie, this is you, pages, at least I think it's you.
Could I just have a word on it?
Oh, sorry.
Just to let you know that the connection's gone down, so nobody who's online can see the meeting anymore.
Okay, right, well we'll carry on.
Continue on,
Very little we can do about that, so we'll carry on.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Debbie.
Just mention the highlights and then take questions?
Oh yes, I thought that's what you would do. So you're not speaking to quite such a big audience as you thought. Sorry about that.
Right, so this is the first budget monitoring report of the
Yeah.
financial year. We are reporting at the highest level, £2.7 million underspend, which is just under 1% of the overall budget. But I just need to point out that £1.2 million of that is in relation to the staff pension payment that we made, the lump sum payment that we made last year. We haven't done this before, we paid 3 years up front. Unfortunately, we didn't sort out the accounting treatment of that payment until after we set the budget, otherwise it wouldn't have been there. It has to contribute back into reserves because we spent money. So if we put that to one side, true underspend really is the trajectory spend of £1.6 the two areas I just want to touch upon.
It's just unfortunate, that, isn't it? Because
Yes.
I get the Police and Crime Panel and others asking for explanations around all of this. Yeah.
Oh, we have to report it as an underspend, but we have actually spent money and it has to go back into reserves.
But it doesn't look, you can see where it gets us back to
No,
the
we get
overtime thing, and if you've got this underspend, why are you asking for growth when you've got, yes, you know the issue.
So
Hello, I wonder if the main room could take itself off mute so we could hear, please. Thank you.
Can you hear us now?
We can, thank you. Tim, thank you.
So it looks though we've restored, Debbie. So we're on Public Accountability Board, Budget Monitoring Report, Agenda Item 13, page 43 onwards.
So I'll just explain that the overall projection of £2.76 million, if we take into account the £1.2 million staff pension sum payment that we made last year, and we put that to one side, the true underspending, the projection of spending £1.6 million. Now the areas that I just want to say a little bit about, police officers pay the staff pay. So police officers pay is an easy one to explain. This is an area where we've refined the way we set the budget in this area. We've got it as tight as we can get it. It reflects the workforce plan. What is not within our control is external funding that we get from the government. And like I say, it's welcome external funding, but when it comes along after we set the budget, it doesn't assist us with financial planning. And so we've received just over £1 million for armed response vehicle and grip funding, and that really is what's contributing to that understanding of police officers' pay. Now, on a positive note, it has given us the opportunity to revisit the workforce plan, and we have been able to recruit 24 detective now candidates, which goes towards addressing some shortage of detectives, obviously partway towards that. We are also looking at other areas within the workforce plan to see if there are other changes we can make which might bring forward recruitment or changing the mix of the cohorts. So that work is ongoing at the moment. So it has given us an opportunity. It's given us an underspend, which has given us an opportunity.
Nevertheless, if you look on page 20, not sure where it is, it's 46 as it is in the pack. You reference there Atlas Court, staff pay underspend of 1.15 million. I mean, I think people would find that puzzling. Perhaps that's not a question for you.
Yeah, and if I just briefly speak to that, Commissioner, there are a number of reviews underway in Atlas Court. So you're right, the headline there seems to suggest that we have a whole range of seats in a business critical function that are empty. We haven't managed to recruit into those, and that isn't the case. We've just undertaken a significant Atlas review, the middle management review and the crime management review are just coming to a close now. Within those, there's been a series of secondments to fulfil those reviews. Those secondees come back at the end of this month, which will make the position much better. And a number of posts that were under review have not been recruited into because we didn't know what the conclusion of the review may be. So there's been a pause while they're underway. As they come to a close now, that there will be rapidly the reshaping. And as you know, Atlas Court has been under a significant review really around that refresh and that renewal and that development. Last November we went live with the portal, the digital desk, and enhancing that service offer. So it's not that through a lack of focus in terms of trying to recruit people we've left a series of vacancies. Very much related to strategic projects that are underway in terms of continuing to build the future strength of Atlas Court.
Okay, thank you.
And I can assure you that that's got my attention moving forward in terms of making sure that that ameliorates itself over the course of the financial year.
And just to add to that as well, I know the workforce plan being actress has changed recently, and I do expect those expenses to come down. Not at that extent, but I do expect it to come down.
Okay.
And you'll see as well that we've got some overspending on all the time naturally as we ready to come some of those gaps. And the other areas within staff pay are around new growth, so not really our business as usual area, it's within growth, and the digital forensic unit reviews gets a specific mention where that is still under review, and that is just it's a timeline, it's still going to happen. But there's further work, I'm going to take some further work in relation to the growth, because we've got the what, but I want to understand the why a little bit more detail.
Is this, I'm looking at page 50, growth, 3.4, well, first and second bullet points, I suppose. A growth bid of 8 million, and then a full year projected outturn of 5.9, underspend of it's just puzzling, that's all.
This is the area that I'm looking at with a little bit more detail. In fact, I've got meetings actually on specifically on this. A large chunk of that we feel is within the staff pay area, and timelines and reviews still ongoing. And there are one or two other areas mentioned there as well. So it is timelines. These things are still happening. It's not that we're not doing any of this. I think we've got to look at this. We've got to understand the why and learn from some going forwards. And you know, it might just be that slightly over ambitious in terms of our timescales, and we need to reflect that going forward.
I can see people will give me a hard time in another place if we don't sort these things. Yeah, okay, thank you.
And those were the main areas really that I wanted to highlight.
Okay, thank you very much. I've not asked anyone through the meeting whether they had any questions or comments, but on this one, does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Then, David, that was item 13, budget monitoring. We're on to Chief Executive reporting. Probably not a lot to say about 14, Michelle, 53 to 66.
Well, I'll take your steer, Commissioner, but we've got a couple of things just to mention. First of all, newly elected PCCs are required to publish a police and crime plan setting your priorities. Your priorities will remain the same, you've decided. The plan is to be set for the term of office, so until 2024. However, you've made it clear that you will update your plan more substantially as a result of this planning cycle coming up, and so February or March we'll see a more dramatic change to your plan, not necessarily your priorities, but we'll see what comes out of consultation with the force and partners and others in relation to that. You have, however, got different areas of focus in the plan, which is attached to my cover report. And you promised 3 roundtables, two roundtables to better understand issues, and some IEP work that we've already mentioned around disproportionality. So the other 2 roundtable issues are violence against women and girls and road safety. So we will be joining the force and partners to understand those issues better before setting a strategy around those jointly with partners and SYP. The Police and Crime Panel are required to have a look at the plan and comment, and they have done. We presented the draft plan to them on the 19th of July. They came back with recommendations, comments on the 3rd of August. We've considered those and given them a written response on the 5th of August. So what you see now attached in your PAB agenda which newly this time, as the cover report says, has to cover how we are complying with the national crime and policing measures set by the Home Secretary. So we've been busily working with force colleagues, and thank you to those, especially in the performance governance team, for helping us with that. We've got a narrative ready to publish. So once you've approved the plan, and we've had a look at the narrative next week, Tim and I, with you, we will publish those and show in the narrative how we comply with those measures at the same time. So that's the plan. and the cover report, Commissioner, unless there's any questions. That's all I was proposing to outline.
Don't know that SYP have any comments at all. I mean, from my point of view, I think this must be about the 6th police and crime plan I've produced, and they've got thinner, slimmer. And I must say I prefer them that way. There are some PCCs who have a police and crime plan which begins a kind of travelogue through their force area with all the beauty spots and all that. We've got rid of all that sort of nonsense, and it's just crisp, I think, and to the point. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for all those who've worked on producing
It's probably important to say that that's not because there's no beauty spots in South Yorkshire.
No,
there
I
are
must
many.
add that very quickly. we tend not to raise them in these meetings. That is true. Okay, thank you. That was item 14. 15, the annual report. Again, that's a look back. Michelle, 67 to 98.
Yeah, the annual report speaks for itself. It's ready for publication. It was taken to the Peace and Crime Panel on the 19th of July, again, Commissioner, because they have a statutory role in commenting on it. They did so. We had the comments by the 3rd of August, and you sent a written response by the 4th of August as to how we've taken their comments on board. So it's now ready to publish, subject to your approval today. I think, just to say, Commissioner, it just shows the amount of work that's been able to be done by the force and by the office and partners during the COVID period, which has been a challenging year, but full service delivery has been resumed, albeit in different ways, in the criminal justice system. I think those new ways mean that some video-enabled technology has been speeded up over that time, so it's positive.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a most extraordinary year, but many thanks to those who put this report together as well as this backward look, so thank you. Any other comments? Right, thank you. Shall we move then to item 16, the Independent Ethics Panel report by exception. Anne, we saw you earlier, 99 to 102. I wondered if there was anything in that you wanted to pull out and particularly refer us to?
Yeah. Can you hear me all right? I'm getting some...
We can hear you. There's a little bit of echo, but we can hear you.
Yeah, fine. We wanted to thank the force for the time they've given to do the presentations for the induction for the new members. The other thing was that we welcomed all the work that's been done on recruitment, and that the force are learning from other forces that have been more successful in this area. We had some concerns, which reported to us about how long the recruitment process takes, and the fact that officers are lost sometimes to other forces, because of this. And we welcome the fact that that's being looked at with an attempt to speed up the process and keep in touch more with recruits. I don't think the GPS tracker pilot seems a very exciting development, and we're talking to them about it. This should actually, it has the potential to save lives when people with dementia go missing. So that was welcomed as another very positive thing that, of course, we're doing. And our main concern was about officers being victims of hate crime. And we felt that perhaps it's something that officers tend just to take as part of their normal duty, but that maybe it's something that we need to look at, because it can't be very pleasant for anyone habitually being abused when they're going about their daily work. I think that was all, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much. I think you're right about hate crime. When people hear the words hate crime, they don't usually think of hate crime visited on police officers, but that is something that we should note, I think. Anybody want to comment on the IEP report? If not, thank you very much, Anne, and thank you to your new team. It's just been very difficult for people to really be embedded as the independent ethics panel when we've had to do everything remotely in this way, but thank you to all of them for their forbearance with that. On to item 17 then, which is page 103 to 114, and that's the JIAC report by exception. It slightly has the feel of everything's in here. Steve, I don't know whether Steve is on the call.
I am, Commissioner, I am on the call, hopefully you can hear me.
I don't know whether there's anything you want to pick out from that.
There's just a couple of things. There's a bunch of annual reports in there that we were able to give assurance on, that the process is being followed. We closely work with internal audit, as you're aware, to make sure that we can give assurance that all the processes are working properly, and we're looking particularly at OI in that, to make sure that's as embedded as it could be. External audit, we note their progress. There is some concern as to whether the resources that they've got will be enough for signing off our accounts and doing the audit of our accounts, but their promise is that they're going to do that within the timescale that's been agreed, although nationally we're hearing that resources are quite low. Able to give assurance that operational uplift is ahead of target. And then finally, the main part of the meeting was, the main part of the workshop that we held was the account sign-off, where we saw the traffic accounts for both the Force and the OPCC, and we were able to agree those and recommend that they should be agreed, and give assurance to you and the Chief Constable that the processes had been completed properly, and that they were available in the timescale that was originally agreed. The accounts departments in both the Force and OPCC worked very hard to get those done as soon as possible at the end of the year. That's all I really wanted to say, Commissioner, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from anyone or comments? If not, again, we thank everybody for all the hard work that's represented by that report, Steve. Thank you. So finally then, item 18 was PCC decisions, pages 115 to 120. Michelle.
Yes, Commissioner, these record the decisions that you've made of public interest since the last meeting. The first one is at 4.2.1. You've increased capital spending by 80,000 for driver training capacity, that's to clear a backlog created by the pandemic. The next one is as a result of a capital programme review by our office, jointly with the Force, we've increased the capital programme allocation by 1.8 million. And then Community Safety Fund underspend as a result of COVID primarily, in terms of activities that they were going to put on that they couldn't. We've allowed the CSPs to put forward proposals to utilise the underspend, which have been formally approved. And then the Violence Reduction Unit has some funding from the bid allocated to giving grants to other public authorities or organisations, both on a South Yorkshire level and per district, which are all set out there. Finally, a balance sheet technicality to address between West Yorkshire Police and ourselves around how we record clothing and uniform stock to align with the lead force responsibility there at 4.2.5. That's all, Commissioner.
Thank you. The only things I'd comment on are in the grants that the VRU gave. We had the manager of the Frenchgate Centre in Doncaster write to us about the amount of antisocial behaviour in the shopping centre and around the other day. I'm glad to see that one of the grants has gone to Doncaster Epic for a pop-up youth space, which hopefully will make some impact on ASB and young people in that shopping centre and around. And also the grants that have gone to the hub on Abbeydale Road and FURD 3rd, which is at UMIX, the UMIX Centre. Again, those are difficult areas for us, and I hope that will make some difference to providing activities for younger people in those areas. And I was at the Unity Gym the other day, which is the grant mentioned at the bottom of page 119. They're doing some really good work with young people of all ethnic groups in they're near to Division Street, where they're working from, but reaching out to Broome Hall, Burngreave, Washington Flats, a really big area that they cover, Arborthorne, Manor and so on. So that was really good to see what they were doing there. And the fact that they're able to open up again now and open every day, which I think is a real credit to them. I think that's everything, unless anyone has any comments or questions. If not, I don't think there's any other business. Sally, no. June, no. Date and time the next meeting hopefully will be a little bit, I don't know how normal will be on the 6th of September at 1 o'clock, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. Thanks very much, everybody, and if you haven't been on holiday yet, I hope you have a good holiday. Come back refreshed, and I'll see you in September. Thank you. Thank you.